The Sultana was a steamboat heading north carrying recently released prisoners of war from the Confederate prison camps. They were Union soldiers and they had been released at the end of the Civil War and they were going home. The Sultana is the deadliest maritime disaster in American history. A lot of people have never heard of it, and there's a reason for that. This happened, the Sultana disaster happened April the 27th, 1865. On April the 9th, Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox. Less than 1 week later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. The day before the Sultana exploded, just hours before, John Wilkes Booth was captured and killed. And all of that worked together to make the Sultana story simply a footnote in American history. There were over 2,100, almost 2,200 people on board the boat. It was almost 2,000 recently released Union soldiers. They had been released from two prison camps. Cahaba, Alabama, and Andersonville, Georgia is where they had been released from. The thing that is so remarkable, these men had survived the deadliest war in American history, the Civil War. They had also survived these two prisoner of war camps. And at Andersonville, over 25% of every soldier in prison there died while they were in captivity. So these men were survivors. They were survivors and they were finally going home. They were going home to their mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, their wives and sweethearts. The cause of the disaster was the boiler blew up. A leak had developed in the boiler as the Sultana is heading north from New Orleans to Vicksburg. Within a few miles of Vicksburg, a leak developed in one of the boilers. At Vicksburg, a mechanic is brought on board and he tells the captain, in order to properly repair the boiler, I need to cut out this ruptured seam and replace it. But it's going to take several days. Well, Captain Mason knew that because of this deal that he had with the person in charge of the prisoner exchange, that he didn't have several days. If he wanted a full load of prisoners, then he needed to get it done quickly. So he convinced the mechanic to simply patch the boiler. The patch worked, although the mechanic told him he would not guarantee it. It worked until it got to Memphis, and then when the boat was 8 miles north of Memphis, it exploded, 2 a.m. on April the 27th, 1865.
Wow.
We're in the foyer area of our current museum. This photograph was taken in Helena, Arkansas. It's the very last photograph taken of the Sultana. And although it's blurry, it is obvious that it is grossly overloaded with people. This boat, the Sultana, was licensed to carry 376 people. It had over 2,100 people on board. And this was taken just hours before the Sultana exploded. This timeline shows where the Sultana went. It started in St. Louis on the 13th of April. The 15th of April was particularly significant for the Sultana. It was in Cairo, Illinois. And on the journey south to New Orleans, they stopped in Cairo, and in Cairo they just got news of Lincoln's assassination. And so Captain Mason collected as many newspapers as he could to take on the journey south, and the Sultana was the first steamboat going south to New Orleans carrying the news of Lincoln's death.
Wow, that's cool.
This display case has a number of different artifacts related to the Sultana, but the most important is this book. It's the Loss of the Sultana, Reminiscences of the Survivors. and it's collected by Chester Berry. Chester Berry was a survivor of the Sultana, and as time went on, they found that the story of the Sultana was being forgotten. And so Chester Berry contacted as many of the survivors as he could and asked them to write their personal recollections of what happened. And he collected those and put them into this book. And we have, although this is not Chester Berry's personal book, we have in our archives his personal copy of the book. And it gives us an insight from about 200 of the survivors of what they experienced, the different experiences they had. Some injured terribly, some not as injured, but still having miraculous rescues, one being in the river for well over an hour until he was rescued, some hanging on treetops. The stories are all told. We have that many first-hand accounts.
Wow. Wow.
On this wall, we have the story of the prison camps, Cahaba, Alabama, and Andersonville, Georgia, and the horrific conditions that were there. This soldier was in Andersonville, and he was not on the Sultana, but his condition is not unlike many of the soldiers who were on the Sultana. This is Andersonville prison. The conditions there were horrific. Over 25% of every soldier in prison there died while they were in captivity, and they never made it out. Cahaba in Alabama was, in terms of prison camps, was not too bad, although it was in a swampy area, and there were times when for weeks they were in knee-deep water. The conditions were horrible. In this case, we have some of the artifacts that actually came from the Sultana. We have fire bricks, shaker plates. We have this steamboat engineer's wrench that at least historically they say it came from the Sultana. We have a brass letter opener that a survivor says came from brass on the Sultana. There is this cartridge box sling that was found on the bank of the Mississippi River shortly after the Sultana disaster. The mallet down here is made from wood of the Sultana. A lot of people don't know what shaker plates are. They would sit in the bottom of the furnace to heat the boiler, and to make the fire burn hotter, they would stick a long pole in there and shove around the shaker plates, and it would generate oxygen and make it a hotter fire. One of the interesting stories of the Sultana, of course, will be the rescue. And there were a lot of different people. Once there was, people realized there was the disaster, people hopped into action. It happened at 2 a.m. on April the 27th, 8 miles from Memphis, so pitch black conditions. It was at flood stage, and so it was some time before people realized there had been this disaster. But there were Union vessels, military vessels in Memphis that came and participated in the rescue. On the Arkansas side, Arkansas was a Confederate state, and you still had Confederate guerrillas on the Arkansas side, but those people on the Arkansas side also participated in the rescue. The survivors told the story of a Confederate soldier in his canoe risking his own life coming out into the river and saving many, many Union soldiers. And that person, that soldier, was this man, Franklin Hardin Barton, who lived near the site of where the boat came to rest. Some of the interesting stories from the survivors would be this one. it says by his picture, this is Private Samuel Pickens of the 3rd Tennessee Cavalry. Swapping a live horse for a dead mule was the best trade he ever made. Now that sounds pretty ridiculous, but when the Sultana exploded, Private Pickens was blown into the river, and swimming by him where he came conscious was a horse. He grabbed the horse thinking it would be his salvation. The horse kept swimming back to the burning boat, and floating by was a dead mule. And so Private Pickens gave up the live horse, climbed on the dead mule, and was taken to safety.
That's a cool story.
We also have here the story of Private William Luganbill of Company F of the 135th Ohio Infantry, saved by an alligator. That sounds pretty incredible. Well, the Sultana had a mascot, and the mascot was an alligator. They kept it in a crate on board. Private Luganbill and others on the boat, when the Sultana exploded, were looking for anything that would float. Some took doors off the hinges. There were wood railings taken off, anything that might float. Private Luganbill remembered the alligator and the crate, and he bayoneted the alligator, killed the alligator, took the crate, and tells the story of how he was saved by an alligator, actually by the crate.
That's cool.
This was Captain J. Cass Mason of the Sultana. He was, his story is one of both fault and heroism. Captain Mason was in trouble financially, and when he was headed south from Cairo, Illinois, when they got to Vicksburg, he worked out a deal with Captain Reuben Hatch, who was the general quartermaster, that he would pay, Captain Mason would pay a kickback to Reuben Hatch for every soldier that he got on board, as long as he got a full load. They worked out that deal, so he was a culprit for having overloaded the Sultana so bad because of his greed, because of his financial problems. But the survivors tell the story that as the Sultana is going down, Captain Mason is last seen still on board, trying to find things that would float to give to the men in the water. So it's a mixed bag with Captain Mason.
But he perished.
He perished. He did not survive. Private Commodore Smith of Company F of the 18th Michigan Infantry is another story. He tells the story of injured people on the Sultana begging those that were not injured to throw the injured overboard, begging them because they would rather drown than being burned to death. I mean, it is a tragic, tragic story, and you can hear in reading his words, you can hear the pain when he wrote it. When he was captured, he weighed 175 pounds. By the time he got to Vicksburg to get on the Sultana, he only weighed 97. Typical of the soldiers there. This model of the Sultana is, if it's not 100% accurate, it is 99%. Gene Saliker, who is on our board of directors, donated most of the Sultana artifacts, including this. Got this from someone else, but it was in fallen apart condition. He put it together, put the details together. It has everything that the Sultana actually had. It even has the Elkhorns. And you might say, what are the Elkhorns? The Elkhorns were for the fastest boat on the river. Steamboats often had steamboat races, and he had won those Elkhorns because of Captain Mason for the Sultana had won those Elkhorns because at the time his boat was the fastest on the river.
And that's those.
It's in between those two smokestacks.
Okay. Oh yeah, the Elkhorn. There you go.
When the Sultana exploded, it exploded about 8 miles north of Memphis, and it drifted downriver. The river was at flood stage, and it drifted downriver and came to rest about a mile north of where Mound City, Arkansas is. In the 1980s, author Jerry Potter, he's a lawyer in Memphis, but has also written a book on the Sultana. He collaborated with the owner of the land at that time, and they went out. The owner had found some artifacts that he believed were from the Sultana, and he got with Jerry Potter, and they went out and took a drilling rig out and drilled down and found burned wood when they pulled the bit back out. Later, it was large metal detectors were run over the land where it is believed the Sultana came to rest, and they found 3 large areas of metal that are buried 30 to 40 feet under a soybean field. It's now about 1.5 miles from the current channel of the river.
And that would have all been underwater at the time?
Yes. The river was at flood stage when the Sultana went down, and it sank in a river chute when it's the river had all sorts of chutes that would go around islands, and where it went down was at the head of Hen and Chicken Islands. And it came to rest there, and then gradually over the years the silt built up. The river changed course. The Mississippi River before the levees changed course all the time, but it changed course more to the east, and it became where the body of the ship became buried under this soybean field. As I said, 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the river. After the explosion, the survivors began to meet as a group, and they met every year, all the way up until the last 2 of them were together, and even after there were only 1 left, that person went to the reunion site in remembrance, but they tried to keep the story alive. They actually petitioned Congress, every session of Congress from 1897 to 1914, attempting to get 2 things. One was a pension for the people, the families of those who had died on the Sultana, and also for those that were injured on the Sultana. And the second thing was a monument to be built somewhere along the Mississippi River so that people didn't forget the disaster. It never got out of committee in Congress. And so with the death of the last survivor, the story was basically forgotten until the early 1980s. And a Knoxville lawyer, a fellow by the name of Norman Shaw, who was interested in the Sultana, ran a story in the paper there saying, if you know about the story, if you're interested in the Sultana story, meet me at Mount Olive Cemetery on a certain date and time. And when he showed up, there were 30, 40, 50 people there, and most of them were descendants of people who had been on board. And from that point, those descendants started meeting and have met every year since 1987, and they still meet. They're not formally connected to us, but we meet with them. They support our museum, but one of their members had collected a lot of artifacts. He's now on our board, named Gene Saliker, and he got with Dr. Louis Interest from Arkansas State University to have the very first public exhibition of Sultana artifacts. And it was held in Jonesboro, Arkansas, about an hour from here. And it was successful, and so Dr. Interest got the idea, why don't we take the display, the exhibition, to the closest town to where it happened and where some of the descendants of those that participated in the rescue still lived. And so they brought it to Marion. That exhibition was so successful that in 2015, the city of Marion established this small museum. It's only 1,000 square feet. And we don't have enough room in this museum to display all the artifacts, to really tell the story of the Sultana the way it needs to be told. And so we have embarked on a capital campaign, a $13 million capital campaign. The projected cost of the building and the exhibits is $10 million. The additional $3 million is for an operating reserve, a signature film, an orientation film for the museum, and other expenses. And we have just completed the second phase of our capital campaign, and we now have raised over $10 million. If anyone wants to send a contribution,
Yes.
Which we do need, you can send a check to P.O. Box 211, Marion, Arkansas, 72364. That's P.O. Box 211, Marion, Arkansas, 72364. Or you can go on our website and you can donate online. You can just Google Sultana Disaster Museum. It's sultanadisastermuseum.com. There's our website. You can look on Facebook at our Facebook page, just Sultana Disaster Museum, and you'll find us.